are faithful, so faithful, faithful.
Right, good afternoon to you and welcome. Those of you here in the building, lovely to have you with us on a really cold day outside, but at least it's nice and bright and you've got some nice warm soup to warm you up and do you good. And as always, those of you joining us online as well, lovely to have you with us joining in this manner too. Wednesday, relaunch time, a chance for us just to pause in the middle of the week and to take stock and to be able to kind of start all over again. That's the whole idea behind that. Halfway through a day, just pause, take breath, and get started again. And especially when we've kind of blown it and made a mess and things like that, sometimes we're inclined to think that's, you can't undo that, and therefore mess is going to be the story of my life. And the good news that the Bible always underlines is, no, there's a God who's able to pick us up, put us on our feet, and get us going again. Lovely to have you always here, sitting around the tables, able to chat with one another. And it's that really that I want to start with this morning, just the whole idea of who it is that you hang out with. Because most of us, most of the time, do hang out with folk. And this is a picture just to amuse you entirely. That was me when I was more youthful than I am presently. And a couple of guys that I used to hang out with. And I'm the one in the middle, and I had a lot more hair then, and that sort of thing. But would you recognize me? Would you? Hands up if you would recognize me from that. I mean, I've told you that's who it is now, so you're that's beautiful. Okay, and some of you wouldn't recognize me at all, but that's me in the middle. And on the right-hand side of the picture is a guy called Will. He shared the same birthday as me. He just happened to be 1 year older than me, but he shared the same birthday. And the guy on the left was a guy called Richard. We sometimes called him other names as well, like Dickie, because his surname was Durham, and it kind of rhymed and matched to Dickie Durham. And pardon? They are, absolutely, yeah. And these were the two guys that I kind of hung out with when I was at school. And I was thinking about that as to why it was that I hung out with these guys. And I realized that without thinking too much about it, the reason why I hung out with them was, first of all, because they liked the same sort of things that I liked. So both of them, they really enjoyed playing football, and we would just go out and kick a ball around, do things like that. And so it was for that reason I kind of gravitated a bit to them. And the second reason I realized was because the three of us were actually all foreigners. I went to school for a bit of time down in England, and these guys were also at the school in England, and the guy on my left of the picture there, he was from even further north in Scotland, and the other guy was from Yorkshire, which is not really England at all. It's there's England and then there's Yorkshire. And so he kind of viewed himself as a bit of a foreigner as well. We were foreigners, and so we kind of gravitated to one another. We enjoyed doing things with one another, going out and just kind of kick a ball around. We would go different places with one another. We even on one occasion ended up at Twickenham Rugby Stadium, all three of us. And it was a Scotland-England match that was taking place at Twickenham. And that's the one time in my life that I've had a kind of awkward encounter with the police, because having trailed the whole way around Twickenham Stadium with a banner that said, "Remember Bannockburn," a policeman grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "I think you've said it enough, off." And so I had to kind of leave the pitch. But we would do things like that. We would kind of hang out with each other, go places, do things. We ended up one summer out in Canada, working on a farm out there, trailed halfway across Canada. It's about 3,000 miles to get to Canada. And once you get there, about another 1,500 miles to get to the farm in the middle of Canada. And we worked there a whole summer and just chilled out, did things together, took time off together, drove overnight to the Rocky Mountains, things like that. And it was just, we had good fun. And there they are. That's what they look like now. That's not what they looked like when they were the age I am in that picture, but we would hang out together. And the particular bit in the Bible we're going to look at today is about a man and who he hung out with. His name was Enoch, and he's quite an interesting guy. We learn a little bit about him, and the chapter in the Bible that we're just kind of edging our way through, because it gives us these little portraits of different individuals. It's a chapter that's trying to show what faith actually looks like. Easy enough for us to kind of talk about faith in a very general way, but sometimes it's helpful just to kind of get the specifics. What does it look like? How does it translate into the real lives of ordinary people? And it mentions this guy Enoch, and in particular who he hung out with. Enoch's claim to fame is twofold. First of all, he was a prophet, and he's the guy who lived before Noah, and he prophesied that there would be a judgment coming, a pretty severe, pretty stark, pretty radical judgment, and he kind of warned people that's coming. And so he was anticipating what was going to happen in the time of Noah, and Enoch was the guy who brought God's word to the people at that time. And Enoch was the father of Methuselah. Okay, who's heard of Methuselah? Yeah. You need to know about Methuselah, because if you're ever in a pub quiz, you might need to know who is the oldest man in recorded history, and the answer is Methuselah, 969 years. And his dad was Enoch. And Enoch, as I say, was a prophet. And back then, in those days where they didn't have too much in the way of people reading books and so on, one of the ways that you got your message across was by calling your children what your message was saying. And Methuselah, the name that Enoch gave to his son, the name means when he is gone, it will come. And one of the interesting things about the book of Genesis is if you kind of do the maths and check up the details, you find that in the year that Methuselah died, 969 years down the line, that's the year the flood came. Enoch wasn't joking. God wasn't joking. It is coming. Be warned, even if it doesn't look like it, even though it kind of seems that there's nothing going to happen. You know, God wouldn't do that sort of thing. He did, and he does. And so Enoch was an interesting guy. And the letter that we're reading in the Bible at the minute, the letter of the Hebrews, tells us this. We'll put it up on the screen for you. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. It's an interesting little statement that about Enoch. But when you kind of scratch your head and think, so what's going on here with this guy Enoch? What was going on? It is actually all bound up with who he hung out with. And we go back to the earlier book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, where we read the story of Enoch in a little bit more detail. And what we find there is this. Let me read this as well from the book of Genesis. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away. And what the writer there is pointing to is simply this, that Enoch kind of hung out with God. In the same way as a youngster, I would hang out with these guys because we kind of liked the same things. We want to go in the same direction. We enjoyed each other's company. We were a support to each other and encouragement to each other when we kind of felt threatened by being down in England. We're not English, we're Scottish, and help, what are they going to do to us? Safety in numbers. We would kind of chill out and hang out with one another. Enoch hung out with God. That's pretty good to hang out with God. When you hang out with folk, you are talking with them and speaking with them and listening to them, doing things with them, doing things for them, supporting one another, and so on. And that's really what's meant by the statement, Enoch walked faithfully with God. It's not like he was on a kind of walking expedition and just kind of carried on walking all through life. It's really describing a way of life in which you hang out with God. And one of the things that the Bible encourages us to see is that that's really how he's made us. That's what we were made for, to be able to hang out with God. in the way that we live our lives. There's a famous verse in the Bible, Micah chapter 6, verse 8, where the questions are, so what does the Lord require of you? Good question. You know, when you kind of stop and ask, what is it that God really requires of you? And the answer comes straight back. It is this, to act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. In other words, to make sure you kind of hang out with God. You spend the time with him. You're learning from him, listening to him, talking to him, sharing your problems with him, sounding off to him, bearing your soul to him, saying, you know, I'm really hassled by this, and so on and so forth. You got to help me. Let's stand together. And you hang out with God. That's the starting point for it. And as you hang out with God, you begin to see the way that God acts, and he always acts justly. And you begin to see that's the way it works. That's the way life works. And so you start to act justly as you do things with him. You discover that God loves mercy, and you begin yourself then to love mercy as you hang out with him. And that's what this guy Enoch did. He walked humbly, faithfully with God. He hung out with God, spent the time with him. He was wanting to do the things that God was doing. Listened to him, spoke for him, shared with him, and he walked faithfully with God. And then he was no more, because God took him away. In other words, he kind of hung out with God so much that God said, yeah, let's just kind of hang out forever in that manner. And his story is the first instance in the Bible that gives us an idea as to where our lives are actually meant to be headed, which is to spend not just the occasional Sunday with God, but to spend eternity with him, to hang out with him for forever and ever. And so the passage in the letter to the Hebrews goes on in this way. Before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And that really is what lies behind what was going on in this guy Enoch's life. And it's got important lessons for ourselves as to how we live our lives. Who do you hang out with? Now, what Enoch recognized was that although I can't actually see him, he's for real. God is there. He's for real. And one of the things the Bible is always concerned to do in telling us about Jesus is to help us understand that God has actually come here into this world, so that we can be really sure that he's for real. And by faith, not by sight, not because we see God, but we know enough from what we do see and what we have learned to recognize that there is that God. And we recognize that coming to him is indeed an enriching, enabling, ennobling, life-giving experience, that he rewards those who seek him. So that when we seek after him and seek to hang out with him in our lives and live our lives with him and for him and through him, then we are indeed infinitely the better for it. That's what Enoch discovered, and that's what Enoch knew, and that's why he's listed in this record in Hebrews chapter 11 as one who lived his life by faith. By that faith, he chose to hang out with God. And that's what I always just want to encourage you to do, to learn to hang out with God. It sounds rather simple, and it sounds sometimes almost sacrilegious, but basically that's it. Jesus hung out with people, and he enjoyed hanging out with people, and he wants us to hang out with him, to spend the time with him, to learn from him, to speak with him, to be taught by him, to be challenged by him, to be helped by him, supported by him, and live our lives in that manner. And that, says the Bible, that's what the Lord requires of you and I, that we learn to walk humbly with our God, hang out with him, and learn how it is to live, acting justly, loving mercy, and discovering as we do so that he is indeed the one who rewards those who seek him. Let me have a word of prayer as we close. Lord, thank you for the story, the record that we have of this guy Enoch. Thank you for the way that he was bold enough to choose to walk faithfully with you, to keep your company and to learn from you. Thank you for the way that you were pleased to use him as well. And thank you for the call that you give to each of us, that we too may live our lives like that. We really enjoy coming here on a Wednesday, just chilling out with one another around a table, hanging out in that way with one another. And it's a wonderful thing for us to know that we can hang out with you every day of our lives. And so we'd ask that you would help us with the particular problems that we're facing at the moment. We're looking to you for that, whatever they may be. We'd ask that you'd help us to be aware of the needs of those around us as well, and that you would use us like you used Enoch to make a difference in the world in which we live ourselves. And we ask it for your own name's sake. Amen. Good. Well, enjoy your lunch. And next week, I think we come on to Noah. And you know all about Noah, but you're going to find out a bit more about him next week. So enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you next week as well.